All right. And so thank you very much for joining us. So we have Michael with us and Scarlett and Deb, and I assume that maybe some people will listen later on to these recordings on YouTube or elsewhere. So this is my second session with Be Your Own Therapist series that is put together by Tupte Nobeling from Santa Fe, which is quite an interesting endeavor, connecting people from all over the world. And so, as I said in the previous session, currently I'm in Australia. I arrived here from Israel, and Israel has been going through quite a rough patch at the moment. I've been talking in the last few days with my friends and family back home, and it's pretty incomprehensible what's been happening, I guess, half the globe away. And so while it is incomprehensible, it's also, I think, for me, it's good also to continue to think of the Dharma, continue to implement what the Dharma says with respect to working with the mind, making a mind more gentle, more kind, more wise. And so we will continue with that today. But before we continue, I would like to take a couple of minutes, first of all, to create some space in the mind, to center the mind. I don't know if you can see that well, but I have the ocean behind me. And so, it's quite easy to quiet the mind and soften the mind when the ocean is behind me. And there is a Buddha statue also here to support me. And so, let's take a couple of minutes just to make sure that our posture is right, that is not too tensed. If you're sitting on a chair or a sofa or a meditation cushion, just find whatever posture works for you. Rather than the posture being the most important thing, having to tick all the boxes, the most important thing is to create enough space in the body to support a mind that can relax, that can become more vast and spacious and quiescent. So if you find any tension within your body, places of discomfort, then try with your mind to lean into it gently. And you can release it with an out breath. Right, so quickly scanning our body from our toes, legs, knees, our thighs, the lower abdomen, keeping our chest open, not manipulating our breath, not forcing it to be deep or heavy. Just let it flow in its natural rhythm. And also relaxing our arms, our palms, and also our face. And then we shift our focus to the breathing process. And we use our breath to anchor the mind. Not only to anchor the mind, but also to make it more gentle and serene and vast and spacious. So we're going to count a round of 21 breaths. Each breath is a support for a focus, gentle and calm mind. And at the beginning of our session, in correcting our motivation, in thinking that be your own therapist means different things for different people. For me, what it means is to draw upon my knowledge and understanding of what the Buddha said in his teachings, being able to use them for my own advantage, rather than having to be told by others what to think or what to feel, and how to work with my mind. I want to develop my inner resilience, my skillful means to be able to deal better with my day-to-day reality. To be able to be of greater benefit to myself and greater benefits to others. And so we are students of the Mahayana tradition, which promotes the welfare of all beings and tells us that we can become Buddha, completely enlightened being with optimal ability to be of benefit to others. And yet, to be able to be of benefit to a vast number of beings, we first of all need to be able to be of benefit to ourselves and to be beneficial to those around us in our interactions with them daily. We need to be skillful in our way of thinking. And this is for me what be your own therapist means. And so to do so, here, as I'm a Buddhist monk, and some of you might consider yourself Buddhist, and if not, that's also all right. But in order to speak of the Dharma and to turn it into something that is meaningful for me, I first of go for refuge, and also combine it with bodhicitta, the desire to become fully enlightened Buddha with full capacity to be beneficial to others. So I rely upon the Buddha, the teachings of the Buddha, and the community of teachers and practitioners that help me to learn the path, to train in the path, and to accomplish its results, so that I myself can become Buddha. I myself can embody the Dharma in my own mind. So I myself can become a Sangha. So with a sense of reliance upon the Buddha, the Dharma, and Sangha, I think, to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly, I go for refuge until I'm enlightened. That accumulations I create through generosity and so forth, may I become a Buddha in order to benefit all sentient beings. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and Supreme Assembly. But accumulations I gather through generosity and so forth, may I become a Buddha in order to benefit all sentient beings. To the Buddha, the Dharma, and Supreme Assembly, I go for refuge until I'm enlightened. By the accumulations I gather through generosity and so forth, may I become a Buddha in order to benefit all sentient beings. All right. And so I started this session with having a quick chat with Michael. I think that didn't go into the recording, but Michael asked me about the accumulation of merit. And so I want to connect it maybe briefly with this verse that I've just recited, which is a verse that was taught by great Indian master Atisha. The first two lines that we use for going for refuge, and the last two lines we use for developing bodhicitta. And so the different variations of this verse, I think that the original verse says in the last two lines, by the accumulation of merit I gather through generosity and so forth, may I become a Buddha in order to benefit all sentient beings. And His Holiness the Dalai Lama has recommended to make a quick or a slight change to the last two lines. So rather than thinking of only the accumulation of merit, we also want to include also the accumulation of wisdom. And so by the accumulations I gather through generosity and so forth, may I become a Buddha in order to benefit all sentient beings. All right. So now I have all my bases covered. I'm going to have a sip of apple juice with soda. And let's pick up from where we left in the previous session. And so we had, I think, open discussion, as far as I remember, last week about what be your own therapist means. We also spoke about, when I started to speak of what it means to me, we also ended up having a discussion about how we can come, first of all, to acquire knowledge that will be helpful in recognizing our own mind. Sido Rinpoche, my ordination master, said before in his teachings that all our problems, all our samsaric problems can be pinned down on not recognizing who we are in general or in actual sense. We not only fail to recognize who we are, we have a completely disturbed or erroneous sense of self. We believe in a fictitious sense of self, not only with respect to ourselves, but also with respect to everything around us. And from that, all of our disturbing emotions arise. From that, we perform actions, we accumulate karma. From that, all our problems and sufferings and challenges and different states of distress proliferate. So it's all comes from failing to recognize who we are in an actual sense. And so in order to recognize who we are in an actual sense, we have ample teachings that the Buddha gave. Often we say, the Buddha taught 84,000 discourses, which directly and indirectly lead us to realization of reality, the reality of who we are in an actual sense, and how do things exist around us. But then to be able to understand that, at least from the point of view of the tradition that we study, from the tradition that we practice, we first of all need to gather enough knowledge. This knowledge, being able to recognize who we are in actuality and to uproot a mistake with respect to reality, is not going to happen all of a sudden, without causes, without conditions, without with creating maybe wrong causes and conditions in attempting to recognize who we are in actuality. I mean, most of us don't really ask that question, who I am in reality. We go through the motions on a day-to-day reality without stopping to ask what do I feel now? How do I perceive reality? Is the way that my mind sees reality, is it correct or incorrect? Is it in line with the truth, or is it completely fictitious? And so we first of all need to gather knowledge. Then, having gathered knowledge, only academic knowledge is not really enough. Also said that we also then need to turn inwardly and start to recognize what our mind is doing. What is my state of mind? Is it a positive state of mind, or is it a negative state of mind? Is it just a benign or neutral state of mind? And how do I use and shape my state of mind currently in order to, first of all, lift myself up from the mess that I'm in at the moment, but also how do I move forward in making my mind more educated, more wise, more trained, more compassionate, more patient, more stilled, more enthused about doing the right thing, more focused, more wise, and so forth. How do I do that? And so in this tradition that we follow, the Gelug tradition, at least within the FMT Center, monks at the beginning of their trainings, monks and nuns, at the beginning of their traditional monastic training, we spent few years of studying a topic that is called independent duja, or collected topics, which is a collection of many different subjects which form a basis for monastics to later on study the five classics, study the system of Paramitayana based on a text that is called the Abhisamaya Alamkara, or the ornament for clear realizations. Then they add to that the system of Madhyamika, the middle way view, the philosophical view that the Buddha taught in the second turning of the wheel. They study Vinaya, they study Abhidhamma. All of this is, and also they study Pramana, the system of valid cognition and logic. And so the very foundation for that is called Duja, collected topics. Now, one of the topics that is taught in Duja, collected topics, is minds and mental factors and the 7 types of awareness. Now, the 7 types of awareness, I think that I've said that before, this present a system by which we can progress from having a distorted mind, a mind that is completely mistaken with respect to reality, raised up with respect to the way that we see reality, wake up with reasons and logic in order to reach a correct assumption with respect to reality, then turn it into a conceptual realization. Later on down the track, we turn it into a perceptual realization, being able to see reality face to face. In the same way that we see things with our bare eyes. Our eyes don't think, but they see. Similarly, we can get to the point later on down the track where our mind can see reality face to face without any thoughts that mediate between reality and our mind, but to see it directly. For that, first of all, we need to develop a conceptual realization of reality. So that's taught, the process is taught roughly in a text that is called The 7 Types of Awareness. So we put that aside. What I thought of drawing from today is another text that is called Minds and Mental Factors. Now, I wanted to look a little bit at mind and mental factors because we're looking at be your own therapist. Part of it is be able to recognize our own disturbing emotions, not only our own disturbing emotions, but also to recognize positive emotions, positive states of mind. Also to recognize other events and other processes that take care of the mind. Now, the recognition of them is important in general, but I think that the crux of it is to be able, first of all, to, when we work with our mind, is to be able to recognize what's happening now in my mind in terms of, is it a positive state of mind? If it is, can I pin it down into one of the 11 virtuous mental factors? If I can pin it down into one of the 11 virtuous mental factors, how do I support the progression, the development of my virtuous mental factors? Then we have a presentation of the 6 root afflictions, the 20 secondary afflictions. So, of course, this is crucial for us. How do I recognize what's happening now in my mind if it's a negative state of mind? To begin with, we want to be sure that what's happening now is indeed a non-virtuous state of mind. And so to be able to do so, we try to be more precise about what anger means, what attachment means, what pride and jealousy and so forth, what they are, so that we can turn inwardly and be able to recognize them. And then also know that if, for example, anger is present at the moment, or belligerence, or spite, or wrath, or what have you, that we have all the antidotes at the tips of our fingers, so that we'll be able to do so. Of course, it's easier said than done, because when anger, for example, is present, you can say that, or if it's present in a manifest and really strong way, it's already too late. I mean, we've already dropped the ball. I can think about it with respect to myself, in that when I think of the number of times that I have been completely out of control with anger, I mean, that I completely lashed out at everyone around me, or a particular person. At that particular time, I wasn't able to apply an antidote or think of my situation correctly and skillfully. I was totally out of control. And so it was too late. But it's good to be able to recognize what anger is, so that at least I know that it is present. Because if I'm, even at a time in which I'm totally out of control, being completely angry, if I know that what is happening now is anger, just the mere knowledge of that, but also being able to recollect what the disadvantages of anger are, I'll be able to maybe diminish some of the efficacy of my anger, try to put the lid on that boiling pot of anger. But even more so, what I thought of doing today is to start looking at the definition of anger. Shantideva also says that in order to put a stop to anger, we need to deal with the causes of anger. If we don't deal with the causes of anger, it'd be difficult to put a lid on anger. So we will also have a look at what the causes of anger are. So that, I think, pretty much, it links that up very nicely with Be Your Own Therapist. So before we continue with the definition of anger, I am wondering if you have any questions or anything that you wanted to share. All right. Deb and Scarlett, you're also welcome to unmute yourself if you want to. You don't have to, if you don't want to, you don't have to also come live on video. But if you want to share something or ask a question, you can do that whenever you're ready. And so could you please use the example of suffering from disease in your example today? No microphone, thanks. Okay, no problem. And so before I deal with that directly, I wanted to look at the definition of anger. I think that it actually links, it will link quite nicely with your question, Deb. And so I have here a list of mental factors from the presentation of 51 mental factors given in that text. There's a group of afflictions which are called the 6 root afflictions. One of them is anger. And so looking at anger, this is the precise definition. A malice towards sentient beings, suffering, and phenomena that are the sources of suffering. This is what anger is. So it's quite a succinct definition, don't you think? It's very short. It says that it is act as a support for not abiding in contact and for misconduct. Misconduct such as harming others, harming ourselves and harming others with wrath, belligerence, concealment, being two-faced and so forth, lying to others, deceiving others, trying to take revenge and so forth. It is acting as support for not abiding in contact and for misconduct. I'm not that sure what not abiding in contact means, but for acting as support for conduct, I think that all of us can subscribe to that. And so malice, let's look at the definition again and break it into parts. So malice is, in other words, a harmful intent, ill will, the intention to harm. And so for those of you who are familiar with the 10 root afflictions, we have, the 10 non-virtues, not the 10 the 10 non-virtues. So we have 3 non-virtues of body: killing, stealing, and sexual misconduct. We have 4 of speech: lying, divisive speech, harsh speech, and idle chatter. And then we have 3 of mind, mental non-virtues. So covetousness and malice. These are the first 2. Then the last is wrong views. But malice, the intention to harm, ill will, can be directed at ourselves, but mostly you can say that it is directed at others. This is the main thing that we're here speaking about. So with any anger, you need to have a certain intention to harm. Now, Lama Tsongkhapa brings up a point, as far as I remember, in his presentation of non-virtues, in the first chapter of the first volume of the Lamrim Chemo. So the first volume of the Lamrim Chemo deals with the steps of the path of those of the small scope, shared with those of the small scope, then the steps of the path that are shared with those of the medium scope. And his presentation of the steps of the path which are shared with those of the small scope, it gives a very detailed presentation of the 10 non-virtues. One of them is ill will. And it says that it brings up this question: do we need to have a very specific intention to harm someone? Like, for example, for ill will to occur, do I need to think, today I'm going to harm Michael or Deb or Scarlett? Or can it be just a general intention to harm? Whoever I meet today, I will harm that person. Lama Tsongkhapa says that it can be very specific, but it can also be general, not directed necessarily at a particular person. So I think that all of us can subscribe to that. We can relate to occasions in which we're so angry or uncomfortable that we kind of just sort out ways to lash out at another person. And often it doesn't happen with a mind that is totally clear. It's not that we think, it's not that we stop and come up with a game, kind of with a plan, in thinking that currently I'm uncomfortable and therefore anger arises because that person has said this to me or the other thing to me. And my next step would be to get angry with that person and then to harm them. We don't think about it like that. It's rather that this process is happening completely out of hand, out of control. But still, we can recognize that with anger, necessarily an ill will, malice is present. And so one point that I, as far as I remember, brought up in a previous session was with respect to being upset, right? Sometimes we conflate being angry and being upset. So there's something that is upsetting us, kind of we already feel stirred up. Deb, you said that, for example, we feel there's something happening to us on a physical level. We are in pain, we are uncomfortable, we become sick, and therefore we are irritable. And the same thing can also say with respect to our mind. Of course, if I think that in most cases, when we are physically ill, when we are physically disempowered, our mind is also disempowered. The mind, in most cases, is also weakened. And so there is a sense of discomfort, displeasure, pain, and from that, anger arises. So this is where I wanted to link it up with something that Shantideva said. Let's see if I can put it on screen. If it's, I think that I've opened file. Yeah. All right. So Shantideva said in his Guide to Bodhisattva Way of Life, 6th chapter, verse number 7, having found its fuel of mental unhappiness in the doing of what I do not wish for, and in the hindering of what I wish for, hatred develops and then destroys me. And so you can say that here Shantideva says that the cause of anger is mental unhappiness. Mental unhappiness because it says, because either I get what I do not want, or I do not get what I want, in the doing of what I do not wish for, and in the hindering of what I wish for. Therefore, hatred, anger, wrath, belligerence, spite, and so forth, all of them develop and then destroy me. And so we get sick. I think that for those of us who have been around people that have long-term sickness or people that are suffering now from acute pain, some of them find it really difficult to maintain peace of mind. Some people become really irritable, short-tempered. We become really short-tempered when we are completely uncomfortable. In the last few weeks, I've been helping one of my teachers who had a stroke. I think that maybe I've told you that before. He's now 86 years old, and he had a stroke 5 months ago. And he's now pretty much disabled. He's paralyzed on the left side of his body. Not only is paralyzed, but I think that during the days he lives in constant discomfort. And of course, his mind is kind of well developed, way more developed than my mind, but still, it displays sometimes moments of being short-tempered. Short-tempered because just discomfort is present all the time. But also, I can think of myself, for example, living here in Australia, and my daily job, if you might call it a daily job, is being a translator. I've been living at Chamrezek Institute for 18 years, more than 18 years. And the study program at Chamrezek Institute is quite extensive. And unfortunately for me, we also have to work during the summertime. I hate the summer. I hate the summer with all the letters in the word H are capital letters. There's no compromising here about the summer. And not only that, there's no air conditioning. As I speak about it, I get fired up again. So there's no air conditioning at the Gompa at Chamrezek Institute. There's only, it's hot and humid. And I have to remain focused for 1.5 hours or 2 hours. And then bit by bit, my mind starts to rumble and become really uncomfortable and then angry. So that, it happened quite a few times where I had arguments with the Lama, arguments with the Geshe during class because I was just uncomfortable. Sometimes people are asking questions or making comments, and it just infuriates me because I'm uncomfortable. And I remember some of those occasions where, now when I think about it, it's so embarrassing. I was totally, you can say out of control just because I was so uncomfortable. And so we get angry. Here it says, let's look at that again. Malice towards sentient beings, suffering, and phenomena which are the sources of suffering. It's quite clear that we have malice towards sentient beings, right? Are they specific or in general? When you think about, by the way, when you think about any bigoted attitude or racist attitude, it is a general attitude that diminishes the importance of others, that looks down on others, that thinks that there's something wrong with others. No, it is mixed with a sense of inflated pride with respect to myself or people in my group, and looking down on other people. And so we have then, you can say, often as a byproduct, malice towards sentient beings. We want to harm them either in general or specifically. That's something that is easy to comprehend. We can draw that upon that from a personal experience. Second one is malice with respect to suffering. And so here, malice with the intention to harm with respect to suffering. I don't know if kind of, this is something that is maybe more difficult to pin down. When we speak of suffering, we speak of pain. There is a painful sensation and we want to eliminate it, vanquish it, harm it, and so forth. I think that probably it is mainly oriented towards ourselves, wanting to harm ourselves for a certain experience of suffering, either physical or mental. Of course, a painful sensation, mental or physical, can also give rise to the intention to harm others, because this is linked up with the sources of suffering. So it says it is malice towards also phenomena which are the sources of suffering. And so we feel that something is painful for me, uncomfortable for me at the present. And there is a source for that. Often it is somebody else's fault, not my fault. It can be also my fault. The fault is my body. My body is the source for that suffering. If we can harm the body, even to the point where we even think of taking our own life, you can say that it is malice that is oriented towards a source of suffering, at least physical suffering. But also, when we think of the world out there, often we think that there's something that I dislike, something that gives me pain, something that creates discomfort for me, and it needs to eliminate it. This is actually quite common amongst us human beings. We think that there's something in the environment that is harmful to us. We need to eliminate it. We need to change it. We need to obliterate whatever is creating discomfort for myself. But it doesn't matter if it comes at the expense of others. Often when we think of making changes in the environment around us, not only the natural environment around us, but also you can say messing or mending with other living beings, with other people and so forth. We think that since they are the sources of my own suffering, I need to eliminate them. I need to change that situation. If you wait for a second, I'm just going to close the window here. There's someone, I think, doing some whippersnipping outside, or some drilling, and it drills a hole in my brain. So I'm just going to close the windows. All right. And so phenomena which are having ill will with respect to suffering, the sources of suffering, and other living beings. And so sickness links into that quite nicely. And the opposite of anger is patience. But when we cultivate patience, I mean, not only the antidote for anger is patience, but you can say also another antidote for anger is loving kindness. So we develop loving kindness with respect to others, with respect to other living beings. We wish them to have happiness and the cause of happiness. It's more difficult to cultivate loving kindness towards a sickness, isn't it? So with sickness, we need to cultivate patience rather than loving kindness. So with sickness, either of body and mind, we have patience, which comes in different forms. Often when you look at a traditional presentation such as Tsongkhapa in his Gato Bodhisattva Tsongkhapa in his Lama Rinpoche, which also quotes Shantideva in his Gato Bodhisattva Way of Life, we speak normally of three types of patience. So first of all, patience that pays no heed to suffering. So we experience pain at the moment. We experience suffering at the moment. Rather than and the suffering is caused by another living being. So I should have said patience does not pay heed to suffering or to harm that was created by another person. So we train our mind in at least diminishing that mental chatter in our mind that is seeking to blame others for our misfortune or our pain and so forth. So that's one type of patience. Another type of patience is patience which pays no heed to suffering that arises within ourselves. We call it patience that willingly accepts suffering. Now, willingly accepting suffering does not mean to say that we remain inactive. It means to say that we seek any possible way, positive way that we can deal with our own problems and suffering, but we make sure that the mind doesn't become out of control in developing anger. Now, here I'm just speaking about it in a general sense, for there's quite a lot that is involved with patients that willingly accept suffering. Maybe that if you want to hear more about it, maybe I can draw from Shantideva's text and Lama Tsongkhapa's text next week, highlighting certain section that help with dealing with sickness and problems. So I think that will certainly be helpful. And so patience that pays of willingly accepting suffering. Now, willingly accepting suffering does not mean to say that we do nothing about that situation, that we kind of just kick back and relax and let pain and discomfort completely rule our well-being. What it means to say is that we try to dampen that mental commentary that is happening to us at the moment. I cannot bear it. This is really out of control. I don't want to have it, and so on and so forth. We reduce the mental chatter that we have, and we try as much as possible to find ways to change our perspective to deal with a situation in a more constructive way. So that's patience that willingly accepts suffering. Then we have patience of certitude about the Dharma, being completely certain about the Dharma. And here there are different things that we do. In general, you can say that we become certain about the teachings of the Buddha. Particularly, I think that it is quite poignant for Buddhist practitioners, in the sense that if we see ourselves as Buddhists and we draw from the teachings of the Buddha in thinking of first of all, our understanding of the teachings of the Buddha, but also of the conviction that we have in the teachings of the Buddha, such as, for example, our understanding of causality, more specifically, our understanding of karma. How much do we trust the teachings of the Buddha with respect to karma? And so when we experience pain and suffering and sickness, we can think that these arise from certain causes and conditions. And some of the causes and conditions could be external causes and conditions, but certainly for me as Buddhist, they're also related to my own karma. I have created causes and conditions for that in the past. What were those causes and conditions? I have no idea. I mean, sometimes it's quite banal when we become sick with something serious, cancer or what have you. We have no idea what the causes and conditions are for that sickness. And also often when we think of what the causes and conditions are, we seek to blame something. I mean, how would we know? How would I know what are the causes and conditions contributing to sickness that I experienced in this life? I've created, but at least for me still, I've certainly created them in my past lives. Could be in this life due to unhealthy lifestyle, but certainly also I've created causes and conditions for becoming sick in my past lifetime. The only way I can recover from sickness, maybe not that specific one, but long-term sickness, is to get to the stage in which, first of all, I'm no longer compelled to be born with a body such as this. So this body is out of control. The moment that I'm born into a body like this, it is guaranteed, totally guaranteed, that I will get sick, that I will experience aging, and that I will die at the end. Well, death is inevitable. That's guaranteed. Whether or not I will become sick, of course, you can say that that's questionable. Some people live till old age and don't become sick with terminal illness. But you can say that still one thing that happens right from the second moment after birth is the process of aging, which is quite interesting in that we think that, I'm now called a middle-aged monk, a middle-aged person. I'm 52 years old. Sometimes when I tell my friends that I feel already that I'm aging, that I'm becoming old, some of them become quite, I think, impatient with me, or sometimes angry with me, as if kind of I'm mocking their old age. I mean, really, when we think about it, even a baby is, as they grow and develop and become more mature, go through at a certain point, go through adolescence and becoming young adult, right from the very moment, kind of each step that proceeded, they grow closer and closer to the moment of death. They age. In that sense, they get old. So, of course, the bodies could be quite youthful. The body is still in a state of growth, but also you can say that it's also in the process of aging. And so I'm 52 years old, and I go through the process of aging, maybe sickness, and death definitely. And so this is an inbuilt mechanism within this body. I cannot avoid it. Becoming sick is part of the nature of the body. It cannot be avoided. It can be something minute. It can be something that is quite serious. But who can I blame for that? Well, I can only blame myself for still letting a mind, which is out of control. It is controlled by anger, attachment, ignorance, pride, and so forth. I can allow my mind to still continue to operate like that and then create actions that compound my suffering. Or I can recognize that this is my situation. This is part of patience that willingly accepts suffering and also that is becoming certain about the Dharma. And so I recognize that with a body such as this, there's no avoiding sickness. Absolutely no avoiding sickness. Does not mean to say that I cannot do anything about my sickness. It's good to receive treatment if possible. I mean, of course, you can say, sometimes some people choose to end treatment and quickly pass away if they have reasons for that. Anyway, so I can think that I've created cause and conditions for that. It's not that kind of, it's not that we think of karma or creating cause and conditions for that as something that is inherently detrimentally bad, but we think that just there were cause and conditions for that and therefore I experienced this. If I do not want to experience that again in the future, maybe there's nothing that I can do about it now, but in my future life, what I need to do is to make my mind more gentle, to soften it, to gently it, to smooth it, not only with positive states of mind, but with the scalpel of wisdom. I need to become really smart and precise and perceptive about who I am in actuality, about who I am as a person, as a self. How do things exist around me? And from that, to develop loving kindness and compassion and kind-heartedness to others. Maybe there's nothing that I can do about my sickness in this life. If it's something that is serious or chronic or fatal or terminal. Maybe I said that, but maybe there's nothing much that I can do about it. But at least if I can change my mind in a way that I deal with that, try to think of how would I avoid something like that in the future, in my next life? How can I behave in a way that is more positive in this life, and also having a state of mind that is more kind? I'll be able to prevent that from occurring later on in the future. And even if I won't be able to stop it completely, I'll be able to acquire better skillful means to deal with that. So certitude about the Dhamma, being certain about the teachings on karma, being certain about how the Buddha described reality, the reality of, for example, impermanence, the reality of death and impermanence, the suffering of samsara, the suffering of the 6 realms of existence, becoming certain about teachings on compassion, and even more so, becoming certain about teachings on emptiness. All of these play a role in developing patience of certitude about the Dhamma, which then helps us to at least keep the bigger picture in mind. I mean, it's quite easier said than done. I remember that it was more than 10 years ago, I think. Just before Christmas, I have a toothache, which I neglected. Then came along Christmas Day, and it started to be pretty serious. And between Christmas and New Year, it was almost impossible to find any dentistry that was functioning, opened for emergency service. I made phone calls to quite a few clinics around and tried to find if there's any clinic that offers emergency service, and didn't find anything. And over the days, this throbbing toothache just intensifies and it completely took over. There was nothing happening apart from kind of this pain here in my jaw. And I completely identified with that pain, in a sense that sometimes when we think of teachings on emptiness and we try to pin down where the real me is, at that point in time, it was here. This is where it was in pain. The whole sense of self was kind of centered around my jaw. It was pulsating. I couldn't get a good sleep. It didn't matter what kind of medication I took. It didn't help. Finally, I found an emergency service during New Year's Day after, I think, 7 days of excruciating pain. And so I'm saying that it's easier said than done, because during those days where I was in absolute agony, it was really difficult to take the methods that I've studied before, that I spoke of before, that I translated before, and apply them into my personal practice in a way that completely transformed my well-being. I was able to do part of it. I think that probably I would have gone completely crazy, or at least 73% crazy, if I didn't have anything to draw upon. But when we're in absolute pain, I have to say that it becomes very difficult to become really thorough in our spiritual practice. But if we prepare our mind to that, if we do it when we're still capable of doing that, if now, for example, when nothing seemingly is wrong with me, it could be that sickness is growing within me, but currently I don't feel any stress, any pain, and anything that is uncomfortable in my body. If I now deeply meditate on suffering, the cause of suffering, with respect to myself, and then I turn my focus to look at others and I develop compassion to others, when the time comes, when I experience great pain, hopefully I'll be able to use that in order to shift my perspective. And this is part of being patient, rather than compounding on problems and suffering and pain, inability to deal with the current situation. We shift our perspective to look at others. Scarlett, I see that you put a hand up.
Hi, hello. So I've been trying to use what I've been learning. I've been intensely trying to learn as much as I can with Thupten Norbu's courses. And I guess one of the things I'm trying to work with is the impermanence of change, because my understanding is when you see things clearly for what they are, it just sounds so cryptic, and I'm trying to unwrap that. But I'm learning that, you see things as temporary and changing and not clinging.
Mm.
How can we maintain that kind of view, right? Like, for example, when we have to make major life decisions, right?
Mm.
That really is impactful, gonna be very impactful. The response is to cling and
Yeah.
not accept the change has happened. But as I'm learning in the Buddhist context, Buddhist perspective, recognize that all things are temporary, and what my fear is that I'm clinging to uh is temporary and subject to change and has changed, and I need to accept that. So
Mm.
I suppose my question is, how do we see clearly, like, every situation that's happening to us minute for minute? Is that what we're supposed to be doing? Because a lot of times when things are changing, I don't know how to view it. And I'm trying to use Buddhist perspective to view it, but I just, anger arises without me even, knowing it's going to arise, or like jealousy arises, right? Without me even recognizing that it's gonna arise. So yeah, I think I'm dealing with the everyday practical use of what we're learning.
Mm. That's a great question, Scarlett. I think that there are also many layers and facets that we can look at with respect to impermanence. So in general, when we speak of impermanence, there are two levels to impermanence. Now I'm just kind of speaking, kind of, no, I'm speaking and thinking at the same time. So two levels to impermanence. There is coarse impermanence, in which things break, come together, disperse, people meet, people break up, people are born, people get sick, people die. All of these are manifestations of coarse impermanence. And they change in that coarse way because of a level that is called subtle impermanence. And subtle impermanence is the ongoing process of change from moment to moment. And that no impermanent phenomena stays as it is for even a fraction of a second. Everything is in a constant state of flux, but we don't see that. Some of it might appear to our mind, but it goes completely unrecognized. And so, because we don't recognize that constant flow of things, constant flow of change, we expect ourselves and others to remain as they are. And we become distressed when we find out that they do not remain the way that they are. Sometimes I wake up in the morning and if I happen to be looking at the mirror as I brush my teeth, I see new wrinkles, or suddenly I have a scare, it's like a person that I don't recognize. I still have a certain image of myself in my 20s or early 30s, and all of a sudden there's a middle-aged, unrecognized, guy at the mirror. If I happen to be looking at photos of myself from my youth, there's a kind of certain pang that my heart experiences, which I, in recognizing how much I've aged. And so all of this is, I think, is related to a certain unstated expectation. It is unstated, but it is still there, that things will remain as they are without changing. In moments of separation, other that people meet and just disperse, that we cannot be with the people that we like, that we want, while we are alive, while they're alive. Now, that moment of separation is quite painful because we expect them to still be with us. But even more deeply is when they pass away, when we pass away or they pass away. We don't think about it in a rational way. we don't think that they will always be with us and we will never change and they will never change. We will never have to be apart. Sometimes we do. I mean, sometimes we do think that a situation will never change. I will always love the person and they will always love me. There's no way that love can go away. Sometimes we think about it in that, I think, irrational way, but often we don't think about it like that, at least not deeply, but there's still that underlying expectation that things will remain the way that they are. So there's, rather than thinking that things are impermanent, we think that there's some eternity within them, that we're eternal, that others are eternal, that our relationships are eternal and nothing would change. And we find a certain comfort zone in that expectation that things will not change. And so failing to recognize the day-to-day, not only day-to-day, the moment-to-moment change pretty much contributes to that. This is the very foundation. So the question is how we can then become more attuned to that. I think that we can become more attuned to that in meditating more on subtle impermanence, with an analytical meditation, and also meditating on, for example, death and impermanence. How we do that, we're going to speak about it. Maybe we will continue with that in next week. And so we have kind of this you can say, developing conversation, which I really like, rather than having kind of a really fixed plan for each session. Kind of you come up with questions and you give me kind of more things to work with. But we meditate on that, but it's not enough just to meditate on that as a one-off thing or for 1 month or for 1 year. It needs to be an ongoing process for the rest of our life. Our mind needs to be conditioned to that. And it reminds me that many years ago, a friend of mine was organizing a visit of Venerable Rubina. I think that maybe some of you know Rubina. Wherever you go.
One question. What is now, as I'm developing meditation, what's confusing me is what you said. We were in a class and we were talking about like calm abiding, and the Venerable had mentioned like when we're doing shamatha meditation, and we can have a great, moment of like, a great idea that's going to bring us money or whatever, but we don't focus on that. We bring the mind back to the breath. When you talk about, and I hear other venerables talking about, like when we meditate, I'm really confused. Like, does that mean like, okay, I'm not doing shamatha, but now I'm going to sit and do an analytical meditation of, say, for example, why did I become jealous at, I don't know, whatever happened? Is that what you mean by sit and do analytical meditation?
Well, in general, I think that when you do the advice for different meditations that we do, is that you come up with a certain plan for your meditation and you don't skip and change halfway through. In that, if you're planning to do a shamatha meditation and thought comes up, a thought about food, a thought about jealousy, a thought about anger, and so forth, if your initial plan was to meditate on shamatha, you need to bring your mind back to the breathing process and continue with that. Otherwise, if we constantly allow our mind to change when thoughts arise, we'll never develop any stability to our meditation. Or like, for example, if we're doing an analytical meditation, like, for example, on anger, on loving kindness, on patience, on pride, on jealousy, the opposites of those states of mind, and then another intervening thought comes in between and we change the course of our thought and we discontinue with the previous meditation, it just creates bad habits. And so we do a shamatha meditation. If that was our intention, thoughts arise, and sometimes they're acute. We try to bring a mind back to the meditation, continue with that until we finish a meditation session. And often we find, and it happens to me, that my mind is too chattery. I try it a few times. If nothing else works, I might finish my meditation, take a break, and then go back to that meditation later on. So that's what we do with shamatha meditation. With analytical meditation, often we deal with either something that we plan to meditate on. If we have an ongoing meditation practice. If we, for example, in our morning meditation, we include meditating on the four immeasurables. So that's an analytical meditation. We meditate on that, and then thoughts arise. They try to interfere with our analytical process. So again, we kind of try to discontinue those other things that interrupt. We continue with our meditation on the four immeasurables. This is done with an analytical meditation. And so there are different types of analytical meditation, but it's important to really stick with our meditation intention. It could be also that in the course of single meditation session, you break it into periods in which you're in shamatha meditation, periods in which you're in analytical meditation. This is how I try to do my own meditations. And so, for example, in the morning session, if I meditate on refuge or the four immeasurables, I first of all start with shamatha meditation. First of all, to create space in my mind and for my mind to become less chattery and more quiescent. Then I go into an analytical meditation. For example, meditate on the thought, may all sentient beings have happiness and the cause of happiness. I do an analytical meditation about that, thinking of different types of happinesses, the cause of happiness, sometimes maybe even parts of a Tonglen meditation on giving the cause of happiness to others, whatever I plan for that meditation. Then I use a shamatha meditation in order to try to infuse my mind with loving kindness. After the analytical part has finished, I sit with that for some time with shamatha meditation to let kind of this loving kindness permeate my mind. And then I go to the next step in my meditation. So that's the combination of analytical meditation and shamatha meditation. Now, Scarlett, there's more that I can say about it, but I think that our time is up for today, and I have a meeting in 50 minutes with the Geshe at the center, which I need not to be late to. So I apologize, but I will have to finish off for today. I don't know if it was that helpful, but what I'll do next time, Scarlett, and also the rest, I will look at meditations on subtle impermanence and also meditation on coarse impermanence, which we can also link up with how to deal with developing patience for suffering that arises within due to, for example, sickness or due to other external conditions. So that's I think that what I will try to do in our next meeting. And so with that in mind, let's finish off for today. Thank you very much for coming along and not leaving me alone in the dark, sitting with my back to the ocean, to the Pacific. It was very nice to see you. We will finish off with dedicating all the positive things that we've created together, either within our internal process of thinking, meaning well, wanting to develop our mind. Also, with the fruitful conversations that we have dealing with the Dharma, we will dedicate it, first of all, for the development of bodhicitta, the aspiration, the wish to become Buddha for the sake of all living beings without exception, so that will acquire the skillful means to be of benefit to others whenever they are open to receiving that benefit. So we will dedicate to that when may the precious body mind, not yet born, arise and grow. May that born have not declined, but increased forevermore. And also we dedicate it for the long life and success of all of our spiritual teachers, for everyone that is helping out in different capacities with Tupten Nobling Center that is providing Dharma encounters and discussions to many people around the world. May that continue uninterruptedly and successfully. And we also dedicate our virtue for the flourishing of kind-heartedness amongst anyone that is experiencing a personal disaster around the world. May peace and love prevail everywhere. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Have a good night, everyone.